For a lot of people, 2024 was a very disappointing year for gaming, which is kind of a pain because now I get flooded with videos about how gaming sucks. There was no new genre-defining games that broke everyone's minds and bank accounts, and following up 2023 was always going to be rough. That being said, the best thing about 2024, in my opinion, is that it's had decades worth of games behind its belt, as this video is about the best games that I played in 2024, not the best games of 2024 overall. And today I want to talk about the games I played for the very first time and mostly finished this year. But that's it, those are the only rules, should be pretty simple to follow. Now, why am I doing this? Well, you'll have to find out, but it's mostly because I'm a stubborn bastard. What's in it for you? Well, you get to listen to my charming voice, bear it all to you, and two, maybe you'll even find a new game or two to give a shot. And if none of that sounds good, then at least you get to ridicule me in the comments for games I've played. Actually, please don't do that. This year's been rough enough already. I can't take it. So let's just get into the game, see what's top my list, see what secret games I have hidden inside this video, and answer the question also, is DLC a game or not? So here's a list of the games that I played either too little of or maybe not barely at all, and I just wanted to see this list to see where I'm coming from. And if any game you're thinking of from 2024 or earlier, I mean thousands, hundreds of thousands of games, it's not on this list, then this is partially why. And if you want to share your list of favorite games down below, do not hesitate, because I would love to see what other people are playing or their favorite games from this year. And this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer video, so sit back and listen and hope you enjoy. So far, whoop, hold it right there, little man. You forgot about a video game. So yeah, while editing this, I forgot that I actually played Zenless Zone Zero for quite a bit on my phone and on my computer, and I completely forgot I even did that this year. So I'm going to put that last on the list, not because I hate the game, but I gave it a shot because I really like the art style, but I don't know, I'm really just not into playing mobile games like this. But this one was good enough, at least on art style alone, that I at least tried it, so there's something for that. Anyways, back to our regularly scheduled program. So for our first entry, what happens when you mix Mario Kart and Bloodborne? Well, you get a cease and desist, but you also get one of the best kart racers this year if you rename it a little bit and make it legally distinct. Nightmare Kart is just this cute little game that was formed from my April Fool's joke and some memes, and I don't know, I wanted to talk a little bit about it because it's free, so if you want to go play it, no expenses paid, you can just jump right into this aesthetically pleasing and just fun little kart racer. There's racing, there's battling, there's not too much else to say about this game other than I had a lot of fun for the couple hours that I played it, and I just highly recommend that you play it if you like Mario Kart or you like Bloodborne, or if you like nightmares. And I just generally played this game a lot more than I honestly thought I would, and I think it's the best kart racer that we've had in years. The next game is the long-awaited continuation of one of my favorite movie franchises, The Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown. This is a Metroidvania-esque Prince of Persia game from Ubisoft, which hasn't had a great year, but this one is definitely worth your time if you are into very fun Metroidvanias with just an amazing, great art style. The story and characters are a little bit especially on the Switch, which is where I played it. But the combat and just the skill progression is just so fun. The combat is very fast-paced, there's a lot of platforming, and it's so acrobatic, which is not something I see as much in these Metroidvania games. Usually they just have pretty standard jumping and slashing. There's not too much flippy, fluid movement throughout the game. There's a lot of little fun puzzles as well to expand on the game. Overall, give a fresh twist on this, and there's just some elements like the snapping a picture to remember where things are that maybe are like a puzzle that are added in this game that I think really enhances the experience and makes you want to go back and actually explore things that you might have forgotten about. And a lot of the bosses and combat encounters really ramp up towards the end of this game, and you start incorporating a lot of new fast, fun combos and strategically using all your little special abilities. And if it wasn't for the fact that Ubisoft basically seems to want to wipe this game essentially off the map right now and that we're never going to get another one, I don't know, I thought it was really worth mentioning. It's been a while since I picked this up because it came out right in the beginning of the year, but I do highly recommend it if you do like Metroidvanias. Next, we have a humble little indie game that expands this list by 50 games, and we're gonna go through all of them. I'm just kidding, I'm not gonna do that, but 50 games in one, what more can you say about UFO 50? Now, some of these games are not necessarily for me, but I wouldn't say there is a bad game. There's just a bunch of different flavors in this. It's an indie game that has 50 little games sprinkled across this fake video game company's roster, and you just kind of go through them and play a bunch of them. It's like going to an ice cream shop and trying out a bunch of samples before you pick one or two and stuff your mouth with it for an hour. And it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn, but you're going to get through all of them eventually, which I've been doing. I've made it about halfway through them, but that doesn't mean I haven't played this game a ton, because I think this game has the potential for you to play like hundreds of hours into this thing. And I highly recommend this if you like this retro aesthetic that you see on the screen and just want one more game to buy this year and dive into it over a winter break or holiday season just to relax. It took a while for me to find my personal favorites, but once I hit a game like Mortal, it was over, and I no-life that game for the rest of the night. It's like a little puzzle platformer where you essentially just use your character's little dead bodies to like help solve problems, and I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. And it surprisingly is pretty in-depth. But then there's also some more simple games like Bushido Ball, which is a samurai Pong like. You don't get too many of those. And I got absolutely obsessed with this game for a little bit. I mean, it's exactly what you think. But there are some that are just so mechanically in-depth that I've actually just put them off for right now, and I imagine I'll just be playing these games for years to come, and it's just going to be a staple on my Steam Deck for probably like the next decade as I invest time into these games. And it's one of the best values you can get this year, and it's just such a good indie game to support, and only reason it's not higher is because, like I said, I've only played through about half of them so far, and some of them are kind of duds, but just for me personally. I don't think there's a bigger contrast on this entire list from the last game to this one. And this might be a little bit of a controversial pick, but of course we're talking about the Monkey game, Black Myth Wukong. At first I was very skeptical about this game being from China and just not knowing, and it almost looked just too good to be true, but once I finally saw some reviews for it and everything, I was ready to just dive right into this game, as it looked like everything that I wanted to be. And I also just really love monkeys, and I really love Souls-like. They're my favorite animal, and just mixing two together and this Chinese-based story and lore and everything just sounded like a dream come true. And for a lot of aspects, it is. The combat is just really fun in this game. There are so many amazing bosses throughout this game, almost to an exhausting degree. And I've also heard a lot of people call this game a boss rush, which is something I wouldn't necessarily call this game, because I think this game is so much more than just a boss rush. There's so many fun little things to explore around the world. There's whole little hidden sections of the game that you can only access by doing special requirements throughout the world. And as a fan of action games, this game gives me a lot of like God of War, even like a little bit of Bayonetta vibes. It's also an absolutely stunning game. But the first real problem that I have with it is that for me on my personal computer, it just didn't really run too well. And that is the biggest problem I had with this game. It had pretty horrendous performance on launch for me on my PC. Probably just not up to snuff, but I don't know, I just really struggled. My PC is stronger than a PS5, but for some reason it almost feels like it would have been better if I did just buy it on a PS5, which is very disappointing. And the main reason it's as low as on this list is because of that. That is the main problem I have with this game. But back to the positives, there's so many ways you can build your little hero monkey and just do whatever you want. There's so many fun abilities as well that you can pick up in this game. And I don't think anyone is really gonna play this game the exact same way. There's a lot of depth here. Now my other kind of somewhat of a problem, but not entirely, was because I did have a little bit of a problem with how this game decided to pace it out. There's some chapters like chapter 3 that were really long. And I just kind of felt at a certain point, like about halfway through the chapter, that I just wanted to beeline through it so I could get to the next one. And that's a little bit of my fault, but it's just how I felt when I was playing this game. And that's just kind of a little bit unfortunate, but I just wanted to move on to the next big thing. And I think my favorite is the chapter 4 area. It's this kind of cool, spooky, grave-like section. And once I first reached into that after chapter 3, I was immediately hooked into that area. And I kind of went back up again, and by the very end, that whole last area of the game, I didn't really like the ending, and it was just because I was struggling, and going on the little cloud towards the end of the game did not help performance at all, and that made that whole last section of the game absolutely miserable. I don't want to talk too much more about it. We're a little bit in spoiler territory, but just know I think this game is absolutely worth it. It is not just a simple boss rush. There's so much more to this game, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it, especially if you wait a little bit more and play it when the performance issues are not as much of a problem. And I do kind of hope that maybe in a couple years I'll come back to this game and hopefully just have a better experience and get that bad taste from all the performance issues out of my mouth. Now the next game is a very similar story, but almost the opposite problem in a way. This is the Korean developed based game Lies of P. It's a game I already made a video on earlier this year, and I almost forgot that I actually played it this year because I initially missed it last year due to Baldur's Gate 3 releasing around that same time. But when I first heard about this game, I was initially a little bit skeptical of this game, as it wanted to take on the Souls-like moniker, and you know, I played a lot of bad Souls-like, so going into this one, I was a tad bit skeptical, but positive reviews made me want to try it out. And after just a few minutes of diving into this game, I was absolutely immersed and enthralled with this game, and the combat is so engaging. The dystopian city of Krat that is overrun by puppets and the petrification disease is so dark and twisted, and I just really had a lot of fun exploring a lot of the things in this game. Because it's a Souls-like, there's a lot of uncovering city secrets and fighting cool new bosses, and the story is definitely more prominent here than a lot of other Souls-like games, or just From Software games in general. But because it is so story heavy dependent, I do think that limits the replay value, as this is a game I only played once. I didn't go back to it and played it multiple times. However, I was hoping that the DLC would come out earlier this year, or some point this year. That being said, the combat itself takes a lot of inspiration from more Bloodborne and Sekiro, with a heavy focus on parrying, which is something that I really love in my games. And one thing that a game like Black Myth Wukong, had parrying, but not exactly in the way that I personally like it. The whole P organ system and all these different arms and stuff and different weapons really allows you to just do whatever you want, whatever playstyle you really want to choose for this kind of game. The bosses were definitely challenging, and don't go into this thinking it's like a baby Souls-like game. No, this has some real hard bosses, especially towards the end. Some of those secret bosses are really tough. And if you're just looking through a new game to play after, Elden Ring's been finished and some other, or you're just waiting for the next From Software game and you haven't played this, I highly recommend you check this game out, and it seems to run pretty well on anything I've tried. It ran well on a Steam Deck. I played it on a Steam Deck and a PC. That wombo combo allowed me to get through this game pretty quickly. Now this next one is a little bit weird, because I didn't play and finish the entire game, but I did finish it off. That sounds weird. And of course I'm talking about Stellar Blade. This is a game that I initially was going to wait for a sale, but then my wife and I were just eating some dinner, watching a little Twitch stream, and she was like, I want to play this game. And I was like, all right, wife, we're going to go get it. So yeah, you got to thank my wife for this one. But it wasn't just her. I played this game personally for about 10 to 15 hours myself, and I really enjoyed my time. But the bulk of my experience was actually just watching my wife play and tagging in when a lot of the bosses got a little bit more bullshit. I think my favorite part about this game was actually just experience and watching my wife turn into a parry goddess throughout her entire playthrough. But I really did like this dress-up Sekiro successor, and Sekiro is one of my top 3 favorites From Soft games for me. So this kind of takes that on a little bit more than our last game, which was kind of more of a Bloodborne-y feel. And I wouldn't say this game is absolutely perfect, but I kind of like that about it. I think some of the story and some of the character stuff is a tad weird and didn't exactly connect with me. But then there's things like the music, which is just absolutely mesmerizing. And every once in a while, I just catch my wife or me just like start humming at each other some of the little ha's and hums throughout the game. The platforming and puzzles were a little bit of a weird drag sometimes and kind of annoying, and my wife didn't really exactly like when the Souls-like elements turned a little bit more into like a Resident Evil game, where you're in this lab and you're trying to discover things and it turns into kind of like a shooter. Those were definitely not her favorites, but she really did like the variety throughout the rest of the game, and it definitely felt fresh throughout the whole thing. I think the main reason this game isn't closer to the top of the list is probably just because Eve herself as a main character is kind of boring, and she's definitely not being lifted up by the supporting cast. And overall, I think this game is a solid 8 out of 8, which sounds weird to say it like that, but I just don't think, for me personally, ever had the potential to be a 10, but essentially it's perfect in its own little unique way. Also, the final boss was a real POS. I hated that little thing, and I don't want to spoil it, but just know if you're going into this, the final boss is a huge difficulty spike throughout the rest of the game. However, I would highly recommend you play this game or find a wife and convince her to play it. Now we're going to make another little jump back into the more retro scene with playing an older game, and I'm talking about Metal Gear Solid 1. I know I've already made a video on this, but the PS1 classic really felt like the missing heavily story-driven game that bridged the 2D era of games to the cinematic 3D era of this modern era. Now, for the longest time, I've kind of hesitated actually playing Metal Gear Solid because of the immense prestige and just dedicated fan base around this, but I'm so glad this year I finally just jumped right into it and played it, as this was my first Kojima game. And if you've never played Metal Gear Solid 1, it really is like a James Bondy very movie heavy cutscene based game with a lot of 2D top-down stealth action. It's a lot of fun, it's a really timeless game, and I love the voice acting and cinematic presentation of this game, especially characters like Snake. His voice acting by David Hayter was a surprisingly charming and just lovely throughout the entire experience. I mean, there were definitely moments where I'm just looking at these lowish poly models and I'm still feeling emotion from them. And I think that's really hard, especially for someone who might be used to more newer, more modern games like a God of War. I think the boss fights are probably the thing that don't exactly live up to the rest of it. But there's certain things like the stealth AI in this game which actually really surprised me how advanced it was for a PS1 type game. But overall, I really like this game. There wasn't really anything terrible about it, and if you want to hear me talk about it more, I do have a whole video on me playing Metal Gear Solid 1. The next video game on our list had some ups, it had some downs, but overall by the end I didn't want to stop, and that's why I played it 2 times and made a video about it that didn't go quite as well as I thought, and that is Resident Evil 4 Remake, a sequel starring Leon to Resident Evil 2 Remake, one of my favorite games of all time. And overall, I really enjoyed this game. I liked the opening hours of the game, and by the end I was absolutely obsessed with a lot of the shooting and mechanics and all the little surprises this game has throughout the entire experience. Now, I did have a little bit of mid-game fatigue when I progressed, as partially just because I suck at the game and I was just trying to get a little bit better, and I wasn't exactly up to snuff with the game's pacing on trying to get better at this game. And at one point in time, I just had to lower the difficulty down a little bit because that allowed me to have a lot more fun playing this game, where before I kept dying way too much to have even a little bit of fun. Now, it is a survival horror game, a genre that I'm ever so more exploring throughout this channel and just myself and playing more of these types of games because I have been really enjoying them. Everything just moves a little bit more quicker than a game like Resident Evil 2 Remake, so that was just a big adjustment for me, as I just don't think I was good enough, and that became a problem. And overall, I don't think Resident Evil 4 or Remake is a personal masterpiece for me, but it is a game that I highly recommend that you do play because it's absolutely visually stunning. There is a lot of content for you to play. I got obsessed for a while doing the shooting gallery minigame. I probably almost played about a third of my playtime was just doing that over and over again. But do be warned, if you have played some of the other Resident Evil games and you haven't played this one yet like me, there is just a little bit more of a learning curve, and I think you just do have to get good, which is not something I necessarily expected from this game when I first started it. But again, if you want to hear me talking about this a little bit more, I do have a whole video on it. It's just one that most people didn't seem to like. The only thing more addictive than video games is gambling, and Balatro brings both those together in a way that I never thought was really possible to addict me. It also is a great value for your money. If you haven't heard of Balatro, it's a little indie game. It's a poker-like indie game that combines poker and these little joker guys that have special abilities, and it turns it into a roguelike game. Now, I'm not exactly sure how to review or even talk about this game more, but the best thing about it is it just makes my brain go brrr, just like, it's very addictive. It gives me all the good brain chemicals, and there's very few games on this list that give me as many happy brain chemicals as Balatro does. Every minute playing this game just keeps my brain engaged, and I'm having a blast, whether it's on my phone or on my Steam Deck or just playing at classic solitaire style like my grandpa on a PC. The visuals are just so charming, especially with the new game-inspired cards like The Witcher. They added like some Witcher cards and Among Us in this game, and all of it's free. When I know it sounds weird to say this, but the fact that it's free is pretty great for us as Balatro fans, because there's so many games that are trying to just nickel and dime you on everything, and this game doesn't. And when you get that first completion of your first run, you'll just be chasing that high for probably the rest of your life, and you're going to be absolutely addicted to this game like I did, and some people even more so. There's entire YouTube channels that have been dedicated to this game, and it seems so simple, but there's just so much in depth. And again, this is just a real good game over this holiday season if you just want to play it a little bit and just relax and have a lot of fun. And if you like it, there's just really no way I think you're going to have a bad time with this game. So yeah, good game, not much else to say, but just play Balatro when you get the chance. Now, I know probably a lot of my Nintendo fanboys on this channel who like watching this are probably wondering, where are all the Nintendo games? Where are my Switch games? And there's really not too many, because my Switch this year was heavily a Persona 5 Royal Simulator, and that's what I probably spent the most of my time playing my Switch. I played like 60 hours of that, but that's a second playthrough. It's not on this list. But what I did play was Metroid Prime Remastered and Metroid Prime 2. I'm putting both of them on the list here. I found both of these games to be some of the most atmospheric and just incredibly immersive, unique, and somewhat frustrating at times, but it just had so much fun playing these games, especially as a long-time 2D Metroid game fan. To actually finally try these 3D Metroid games was just a blast. Again, I have 2 more videos on both of these, and I'm planning on playing Metroid Prime 3 later, but this Metroid Prime, if you don't know anything about it for some reason, combines like first-person shooter and Metroidvania and even some Zelda-esque elements into it for just a one-of-a-kind, very unique experience. It's almost nothing like, I haven't played almost anything else like these games. Unlike a lot of other first-person shooters, this game emphasizes more on like movement while shooting and rather than targeting enemies, as you can just lock on right away, which is something that someone who sucks at first-person shooters, that was a great boon and it already makes this game on the top of my list of first-person shooter games. There's so many fun boss fights, especially in Metroid Prime 2. Metroid Prime 2 just ups the difficulty as well from Metroid Prime 1, and I highly recommend you just play one back to back. I hope they eventually make a Metroid Prime 2 remastered, and then hopefully a 3 remastered, and then all of this is leading up that I'm hoping that I'll enjoy Metroid Prime 4 later next year or 2026. We'll see when it eventually does come out. But yeah, Metroid Prime 1, Metroid Prime 2 are truly unique games, and there's really, I feel like, nothing else like these games out there. So if you want something completely different to play, I highly recommend that you play both of these and Metroid Prime 3. I'm getting to that one. Now for our next game, what if you just put Resident Evil 4 Remake on a spaceship and made a sci-fi survival horror game? Yeah, I'm talking about the Dead Space remake from early last year. This game is just a leftover from last year that I didn't really have the time to play, and I played it around September this year. This game is just my absolute jam. Like, I had so much more fun throughout the entire experience. There was never a single down point in this entire game, unlike where Resident Evil 4 I found it a little difficult at some points. This game I just started off at like normal difficult, played it like how I thought I would have the most amount of fun playing it, and it was just an absolute blast from very beginning to very end. And the intro is very spooky and has like a almost BioShock quality where it just immediately puts you into the action and ups the stakes to 11. I love a lot of the visuals throughout this game. This is I think the prettiest game that I have played the entirety of this year, even though it came out last year. There's so many dark areas that are just perfectly dark, where another game like Resident Evil 4 Remake, I had to mess around with the settings, but when I played this game out of the box, everything was just the perfect amount of dark and spooky that I wanted it to be, and visually it looks amazing. Isaac, our main character, he's an engineer just like me. His suit is so cool to look at. It's everything in this game, like about the UI and stuff, is very diegetic as well. You have these little holograms for anytime you're calling someone. The back of Isaac's suit is also your health bar, which is, I think, just really cool to see. All his suits too look so cool. I just wanted to stare at every single one of them. Story-wise, it's also not a slouch. There's some great moments where I'm going to spoil one, but there's this one moment where this guy kind of freezes you and he just starts monologuing. He's one of the main villains of the story. And it's just something I did not expect from this game, and just makes the storytelling in this game. And there's some just really great moments like that throughout this entire game. But I think the biggest thing why this game is on this list isn't just the visuals or the story or anything like that, but is the enemy variety and all the new weapons you can find. The saw blade weapon is probably my favorite thing, one of my favorite things in the entirety of video games, honestly. I absolutely had a blast using those. And everything in every situation I possibly could. And anytime you put an enemy down, you can stomp them, which is such an effective way to just have so much fun in this game, just stomping at every single alien blob. And it eventually just made me in real life just wanting to stomp around the house. But in the end of the day, Dead Space Remake, I can't talk up this game anymore, other than if you like other survival horror games and you haven't played it yet, or you've been waiting off, or you didn't try this game out last year, I highly recommend that you start a survival horror journey here, or you just play this game, because I think it's definitely worth it. The next game on this list is the first one I really obsessed over this year, with a total of about 80 hours in total in the game, and that is Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. If you're not familiar, this game is part of the Yakuza series, a game full of both serious drama storylines, tackling political issues in Japan, as well as making fun of Americans for being dumb. This game takes place in Hawaii, which is a great setting for the game and adds a whole new wackiness to this game. The cast of characters is full of light despite the average age of the characters being about 40, and Ichiban as a main character is never overshadowed by the monstrous legacy of Kiryu. And speaking of Kiryu, his storyline here really tugs at the heartstrings, especially as a fan who's played all of his other games. The world has so many fun new side activities like Crazy Eats, a food delivery Crazy Taxi-esque minigame, and tons of short stories based on other characters throughout Hawaii, including many returning characters from previous games. And they have a full-ass Animal Crossing game inside this game, and that's just as ridiculous as it sounds. Especially as an Animal Crossing fan, merging these two things together was a real treat for me this year. This game also improves on the combat from the very first game, just Like a Dragon, Yakuza Like a Dragon, and it allows you to walk around a little bit more during combat, and there's this whole job class system which is even more crazy than last time and can be absolutely abused to JRPG perfection. And I grinded so much in this game and I had so much fun. And it's just another game too that I think benefited from the PC Steam Deck Wombo combo, as that's where I played it. Overall though, I highly recommend that you try out this game if you haven't, but definitely play the first one first. I am a lifelong enjoyer of JRPGs and Final Fantasy games, and I really enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Remake that came out a couple years ago, so it's no surprise that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is on this list. In fact, for most of the year, it was my #1 game on this list. In the game, we're just picking up from the wild insanity that we left off from Final Fantasy VII Remake's ending, and from moment 1 of this game, I was 100% into the new game. And being able to just explore an open world this time made me feel like this was a true JRPG that I love, and not a more linear experience like the very first game. I really love the entire cast of characters in Final Fantasy VII, even though I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy VII original, biggest fan of all time or something. But I really do enjoy that original game, and I'm just really curious to see how this little trilogy of games expands on that and makes its own little weird story. The combat in this game is probably my favorite JRPG combat style this year, except for one more that we still have to talk about. It's fast, it keeps your brain moving at all times, and it makes you feel like a high IQ, god-level gamer when you pull off something sick. There's a lot to also build up with your characters. I messed around so much with the whole Mysteria system and trying out different combos to make this gas to characters god-killing superhumans. And I would say the visuals are not exactly perfect if you were playing it on a PS5 performance mode like I was, but if you just like scooch the couch a little bit back and it's a little fuzzier anyways, you probably won't even notice. And I don't really want to get too much into the main story just like our last game because it is a sequel to a game. But I would say I'm very much intrigued on where this story goes, and I'm just excited to be along for the ride for the third game. I'm mostly here for some of those just emotional elements with the characters, like Barrett, who I think absolutely killed it in this game. I think he's pretty underappreciated. Everyone I feel is talking about the other characters in this game, but he had a absolutely great performance throughout this entire game, and the last one as well. Also, this game adds so much more side content compared to the last game, and it's just absolutely fantastic here, especially in the very beginning. There's so many stupid little things to do, and for most of the game I did pretty much every single thing I could possibly find, but like many I think have already talked about, the pacing for this game got a little bit too much at around the 80% mark, and I did kind of give up eventually on doing everything in the game. But one thing I didn't was something like Queen's Blood. I got absolutely obsessed with Queen's Blood in this game. And I don't usually do card games in games, but Queen's Blood has been my second favorite card game this year. And overall, if you haven't played this, I do highly recommend you play the remake, or play the original, play the remake, and then play this, which is a lot to handle, and it's probably why this game hasn't sold bananas, but it is what it is. They're trying to build up something really cool here, and that's the only way to really appreciate this game, I think. You know, I think it's very hard as games are getting even bigger and bigger every single year to keep the gamer or the player engaged for an entire dozens of hundreds of hours. There's very few full games, except for #1 on this list, that do that like any other, and that is Metaphor ReFantazio. There's no game that makes all the slower moments in the game feel worth it. Every time a little bar, a little number goes up, it feels so much more satisfying in some way, probably because the UI design in here in this game is absolutely fantastic, and it makes it feel better than any other game that I have played this year. The immediate presentation of this game and its cutscenes and UI are just so beautiful. The character designs are some of the most unique that I think I have seen this entire year, if not my entire life. If you've never played a Persona or an SMT game, we're essentially merging the two. And that being said, I think Metaphor ReFantazio being a whole new series is the perfect way to get into this if you have not played either of those two other series. The story itself kicks off with you, just a little Elda boy, suffering through a lot of racism and stuff against him for being an Elda, and there doesn't seem to be many of those in this world. And you, the main character, are trying to stop the entire country and the entire world from being taken over by Griffith. The first city that you land in this game is so much more massive compared to anything that Persona or even SMT that I've seen have ever done. It mixes linear elements and open area design so much better than I think any other game on this list as well. This is the best cast of characters that I maybe have ever played. This game gives me a lot of feelings as my favorite game of all time, which is Xenoblade Chronicles. This cast of characters is up there in probably my top 5, maybe even high, maybe even top 3. And I think that's something that's very important in JRPGs, to have a good cast of characters that you just like talking to and that you want to turn into, again, these god-slaying absolute beasts of humans and elves or whatever. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some minor spoilers right now. There's characters like Heizme, who's just this little like rabbit dude guy, and he probably shoots up to one of the best characters that I've ever played in an entire video game. He's one of probably my top 10 favorite characters in any video game ever. I love that little guy. This game also really improves on games like Persona, which had some kind of like every once in a while they have a dud or just a character who's not my favorite. You have characters like Stroll, who's just this much more confident, calm, delinquent-like character, but he's very smart. He actually has good ideas, unlike a lot of the other Persona first male characters that you have in games. And then you also have characters like Hulkenberg, who has this amazing accent that I love to listen to. Voice acting and every single character is absolutely sublime. But Hulkenberg is another like serious character who is also used for a lot of comic relief, and it's just a lot of fun. I love, again, I can't say this much, this is just one of my favorite cast of characters, and that is exactly why this is at the top of this list for full new games that I absolutely loved this year. But it isn't really just the cast of characters, because the combat and whole flow of this game is excellent as well. This game makes everything through dungeon crawling so much quicker. You're high enough level and the enemy's low enough level, you can just hit them with one little hit and they'll die instantly. And then when you do get into full bosses or full combat scenarios, every once in a while you're just one bad hit from entirely losing the entire match or game overing. But game overing or getting close to that is not a bad thing in this game, because you can easily reset every single battle to try again, which is an excellent quality of life feature that's in this game that I don't think I've ever seen in any other JRPG, at least ones that I can remember that I've played. And yeah, towards the end of this game, the stakes just get incredibly high. I'm having the best time of my life. This game also does not mess around. It's very difficult at times, but you can also adjust the difficulty level on the fly whenever you want to just have it a little bit easier on yourself. There's such a variety of dungeons and there's such a variety of areas. The archetype system is my favorite like job kind of class system this year. I've messed around so much with just actually grinding, which is something, you know, as I get older, I do not grind as much in video games. So yeah, I don't know what else I can say about this game other than if you haven't played it, it's a great place to jump in. If you haven't played another Atlas game, Persona game, an SMT game, I highly recommend Metaphor ReFantazio. Is probably the game I recommend the most on this entire list if you haven't even tried it a little bit. So yeah, that's it. That's it. There's definitely nothing else to talk about. There's no other controversial picks. So yeah, we're going to talk about the DLC. We're going to talk about Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which is what I would call my favorite gaming experience this year, because I'm not trying to gaslight you. I just think you need to be a little bit more open-minded when you're talking about what is a video game, and I think Shadow of the Erdtree is definitely, it's in its own way, a full-length game. If the base Elden Ring game was Dark Souls 4 and 5, this game is definitely Dark Souls 6, because it just has that much content and that much quality. And I think this is probably the best DLC, or maybe even the best game that they have ever done. Now, for a while now, Sekiro has been my favorite FromSoft game. Even after playing Elden Ring, it didn't top the cake for me. However, now with this DLC added into the mix, I don't know, I think I need to reevaluate that. Maybe play Sekiro again, but I think this whole Elden Ring package is my favorite FromSoft game. I think the whole Shadow Realm is just, oh my gosh, I mean, it's even prettier and more interesting to look at than even the base game. There's so many new ways to build your shriveled, tarnished man guy. I chose a Dark Paladin Light Greatsword Crag Blade Smack and build for most of this DLC. There are so many memorable bosses throughout this game, like Mesmer. There are also a couple duds. I absolutely grew to despise the giant tree, straw dickhead guys that are roaming around, but a couple of them gave some pretty good tears. But I think the crowning jewel of this game has to be the world design. Hands down, this area is the most fun gaming world I've ever explored and that I've had this year. Probably my top 5 ever. It's so dense. I love how you can see so many areas and spend 30 minutes trying to figure out how to get there, somewhere in the bottom or somewhere up high that you can see from very afar, and you are then rewarded with a cool boss fight when you finally get there. The map in this game continues to be one of the best in the business, and there's just so much world and places to discover stacked up on top of each other, and I think it's one that sets a new standard for even FromSoft. And I honestly don't even know how they could possibly improve on this game's world design from here. Now that's a lot of praise, but there are a couple gripes that I have. First is I wish I didn't have to play the whole game again to go through this DLC again, which is where I'm struggling right now, is I want to play this game just the DLC again, but I can't because I have to go play through the entire game again. And I did that this year, cosplaying as Malenia, but if I'm being honest, I don't want to go through the whole Elden Ring base game experience just to get to Mohg, just to get to the DLC again. So that is a bummer. And this is a spoiler, again, biggest gripe, probably biggest thing that was talked about in this game, but spoiler for the final boss, because I gotta talk about it. So I did play the final boss pre-patched, and I don't know how it stacks up now and after all the nerfs, but it was definitely rough. You know, I got down to the first phase basically to a no-hit run, and then as soon as phase 2 would hit, I would just sometimes die almost instantly, or after trading a couple blows with Radahn, and it really did feel like bullshit to me. And it just took plenty of hours and hours of just trying out things, and after a while, I did ultimately feel like I just kind of wasn't exactly having a lot of fun with this final boss, even though I had so much fun with the rest of the game, and I did kind of want to move on. It was pretty clear to me with my build, I was going to have to perfect dodge everything for my Dark Paladin build, and I mixed and matched so many different low combos, different tiers and ashes, but at the end of the day, I didn't get good enough for this boss. So it was either go back to the drawing board and try out a bunch of different builds, or just call someone who had already done all that work and let them finish the game for me, which is, I kind of bitched out and eventually did that. And so a lot of thanks to this guy for doing it for me. But really, in the end of the day, I still had a lot of fun playing this game. The boss wasn't exactly the climactic experience I wanted, but mostly just because I didn't want to spend another like week or something like that trying to beat this final boss, and I wanted to move on to other things. But if you haven't played Elden Ring, if you haven't played Shadow of the Erdtree, I highly recommend that you play this game. It's, again, one of the best games I've played in recent memory. I had a lot of fun playing it, and that's why it tops this list as a secret little choice. But that's really it. That's the end of this video, and that's the end of the 2024. I played a lot of games from 2024 and a lot of games from the backlog, and it was overall just a great year for playing games on the backlog and whittling that down a little bit. But again, let me know what your favorite games from this year were, as I would really like to see that. And just one last thank you for just stopping by and supporting the channel, I guess, and watching this whole video all the way through if you made it this far. I had some really good videos this year. I had some ones that didn't do, I guess, as great as I wanted to, but overall, I'm pretty excited for my next video, and I'm also really excited for next year, as hopefully we'll be getting a Switch 2, and hopefully that means I'm going to have a lot more videos or stuff on something like that. So if that all sounds great, like, subscribe, and hope to see you in the next one, as we will hopefully be linking the past.